Welcome back to the show. I'm Kim Foster, and I'm an MD turned coach, a business mentor for my fellow health and wellness coaches, and also the founder of the Wellness Coach Academy. So, when you're building a wellness business, eventually what can happen is that you start getting very, very busy and very overwhelmed. My guest on today's episode calls this the messy middle, and that's absolutely what it is. It can be very stressful and hard to know what you need to do to scale to the next level. At this point, you also might be battling a lot of the noise that's coming at you externally, especially through social media, about where you should be in your business and how much you should be making at this stage of the game, and a lot of other toxic expectations and pressures. You might also be feeling a lot of comparisonitis and feeling like you're not doing things right. So, if any of that sounds familiar, and if you are feeling like you have become a slave to your business and you've lost track of why you're even doing this in the first place, then this episode is for you. So, my guest today is Kristy Robinson, and Kristy is a coach who helps small business owners wade through that messy middle to create a sustainable business that they genuinely love. Kristy is a mom of two and a wife, and also the founder of two businesses. And she knows firsthand all about that entrepreneurship roller coaster, doing all the things and working all the hours with too much overwhelm and too little fulfillment. So I'm really excited to share this interview with you because I had just a terrific conversation with Kristy, and she shared so many useful insights on this topic. So let's get into it. Okay, well, hey, Kristy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation because, of course, what we're going to talk about is what happens when wellness entrepreneurs find themselves in this uncomfortable situation of trying to scale their businesses, right? And maybe because they've become booked out with clients, which is a good thing. I mean, that's an amazing thing, but it can lead to a lot of stress. I'm sure you've seen this. I've certainly seen this. And feeling like you need to scale, but that's causing a lot of stress also. And so we're going to talk about what people can do about all of that. And really, I mean, it's so important, I think, because we go into business for ourselves typically because we want that freedom and that flexibility that we weren't finding in our job or career 9 to 5, and maybe to get away from the tyranny of a boss or whatever. But then we kind of create something that is maybe we become like slaves to our own businesses and really have created something of a monster. So anyway, if you are, as a listener or a viewer, if you are finding yourself in that situation, then we have got some great stuff coming up for you. So stay tuned. Now, before we get into all that though, Kristy, let's give our audience a bit of context about you first. Just give us a little bit of an intro into who you are, what the work that you do is, and really what brought you to this work that you're doing today.
Thanks, Kim. Yes, and I'm so excited for this conversation for all the reasons that you have just shared. So a little bit about me. I am a mum of two little children. I am a business coach for business owners who are in the messy middle of business. So the messy middle is what I would describe as coming out of that startup stage. Things feel uncomfortable, you're growing, all the things that you talked about in the intro just now. I help business owners in this stage of business to really set their business up for success so that they can grow and really build a business that's aligned to their big vision of the business, but also honors and respects their lifestyle goals as well. I bring with me over 2 decades of experience that is varied, and I think that it's for this reason that I'm really best placed to suit my clients in this space.
Yeah, I love your use of the phrase "the messy middle" because that's really how it feels, right? And it also can feel so overwhelming. Like, how can you even get your way out of it? And what have you done? I know that a lot of people start to think like, "Oh my God, this has been a big mistake. This is not what I intended to create. Maybe I should just go back to the 9 to 5 because at least that was nice and clean, right? Like you go to your job, you do your thing, and then you're back to your family life or whatever." So I'm so excited to talk about this. I would love to talk about the narrative out there, that's out there about scaling fast. I think you know what I'm talking about, but what are your thoughts on that narrative that exists out there?
Oh, yes. The internet is a very noisy place, and especially so for entrepreneurs that are looking to the internet for a source of information or inspiration. And there is so much narrative around growing fast, hitting big revenue goals as quickly as possible, and building, a six-figure, seven-figure business within a certain type of time frame. And I think that this is something that, as business owners, particularly, I would say that most business owners are quite high achieving individuals and people that aspire to achieve big goals. And so when you see this type of information or story out there to grow quickly, it's easy to get caught in this feeling of I'm not good enough because I'm not growing at the pace that the internet is telling me to.
Yeah, exactly, and that whole comparison trap, I mean, that's so toxic and can really lead to a lot of negative feelings for sure. What would you say is what's the antidote to that? How do we sort of remove ourselves or protect ourselves from that, or just neutralize all of that noise that we're hearing about, like, "Oh, this is what's normal. This is what you should be doing. This is what you should be striving for."
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that I have this belief, and it's a true coaching philosophy that you, Kim, me, Kristy, I'm the expert of my business, you're the expert of your business, and so is your listener. They are the expert of their business. So I think when we, first of all, honor the fact that we are the expert of our own business, that also takes that heat out of what we're reading in terms of content. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that also knowing that when you read a piece of content, you might be reading an Instagram caption, for instance, and there's not a lot of context to that. And how does that actually apply to your business? So you need to always keep in mind that content is about clicks, it's about likes, it's about follows, it's about all of those things. But is that actually related to you and your business? So when I'm working with my clients, the first thing that we do is to really set the what I call the bedrock of the business, which is the vision, the mission, and the values. When you know these three things, when you have this foundational piece of your business, then you know what is important. You know the direction that you're taking your business in. And the reason why this is so important when it comes to, well, everything in your business, but specifically relating to this topic, is that your vision is essentially where you want your business to be 10, 15 years from now. So what the internet is telling you is completely irrelevant because you know where you're going. And then the second piece of the puzzle, which I think is the piece that's really missing when it comes to this narrative, is what's important to you and your life goals. So I mentioned at the top of the episode that I'm a mum of two. I lead with that because that's who I am. I am a wife, I am a mum of two, and I am not prepared to work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks to build a business so that I can hit some rhetoric number. That's just not important to me. What is important to me is to work the hours that I want to work, which is essentially school hours, and to build a business that I really can help other business owners to build a business that they love as well. So your vision, your mission and values as well, but also knowing what's important to you and your life, because those two things will help you to decipher what on the internet makes sense for you and your business.
Yeah, that I totally agree, and that is so true. I mean, I'm with you. I'm a mom of two also. And yeah, exactly. I didn't create this business so that I could be just a slave to it and have no time for my family. Quite the opposite, actually. So, but really like anchoring into that is just, it's so helpful to just tune out all of the noise and all the external pressure that comes. But I love what you said about how it's unique, right? Like it's individual for everybody because my goals, my mission, my values are going to be different than what somebody else, even somebody in the same industry, the same sector, like all of those kinds of things. So I love that you work with your clients in the beginning to, what did you call it? The bedrock of their
The bedrock.
business?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. To like really establish that foundation first, because that's just going to you can build on that foundation. Then everything else after that is informed by the decisions and the clarity that you have achieved with them through that. Do you have a process for helping people to really like tune into what is their own mission and vision and all of those things?
Yeah. So the first thing that I do with my clients is we do what I call a business audit. So that is a deep dive into everything about their business. And they do that online, and it's so lovely to read it because I get to access their brain essentially, and they're
Nice.
just brain dumping. It's like a journal essentially. So for your listener, that's the first thing that they could do if they're listening to this podcast and they think, where do I start? Just
Mhm.
start assessing your business. What do you love? What don't you love? Where do you want to be? And I think when it comes to the vision, it's really simple. Where do you want to be 10 years from now? And vision cast that in the sense of how old will you be? What will your life look like? What are all the things around it? What impact have you created in this world for your clients? Through your business, all of those sorts of things. So there's also obviously process around, how to craft a succinct vision and all of those things. But I think that if you're DIYing this, really getting clarity on what impact you want to create, what you love about your business, what you don't, and start there.
Yeah, I think that that's fantastic. And what I really like is that you are doing this, like the importance of this, even though you're in the messy middle, as we've, kind of talking about this stage, right? Because it seems like a logical thing that people will do at the beginning of creating their business, is to set their vision and, do like all that where their goals are for at the very beginning, the baby beginning of their business. But it's really important to do it at all the stages throughout, especially when you hit that messy middle, because at that point you've been inundated, like we've been talking about, with all this stuff coming at you, with giving you these expectations and ideas of where you're supposed to be, and it can really easily push you off course of where you had, like what you had initially intended, what was initially important to you in terms of your values. So to really like circle back to that and check in with that and make sure that you're still really aligning everything with your true values. I think that that's just so important. Do you find that when you work with people who are in that messy middle, that they, have to really reconnect with why they actually went into this in the beginning?
Oh, absolutely. And to your point around, is it something that you do in the beginning? I think that when we start our business, it's a series of educated guesses. We're taking our
It's
experience, our
true.
life experiences, our business experience, our professional experience, and we're putting that into something that we think we're going to like. But then you get into it and you start this thing and you test that thing and you work with that person, and then you're like, nope, back out. So,
Yes.
so there's so much experience that comes from those first couple of years in business that you then get to really put into it at the messy middle stage. So I think that's key. But I think to your point, it's important to reconnect to it. But I really think that the messy middle is going to be the best time to truly get the most out of this experience of setting the bedrock.
Yeah, that's true, because in the beginning, you're right. Like, you don't know what you don't know yet. And you might think that you really want to do, run your business in a certain way. But then once that starts happening, you realize all the pitfalls that maybe it's not exactly what you expected it was going to be. So, yes, that's such a good point. I'm wondering, like, in terms of, so there's vision and there's like big picture vision and all of those things. But then when it gets down into like the nitty-gritty of offers, so like what your business model is, what you're actually putting out into the marketplace. So tell me, what's the secret to really like sharpening your offers so that you can, ideally make more money and work less and get yourself out of this like stress spiral?
Well, I always think the very first place to start with is with you. And I think the thing is especially as female entrepreneurs, we have this really good job of keeping ourselves small and keeping ourselves in this really safe zone. And I think the thing is, when you do that, it's going to always limit your success. And so when you do the work around what makes you unique, what are all of those little pieces of the puzzle that make up the picture on the box? That is ultimately what you get to present to the world. And when you know that and you honor that, you're able to craft offers that are impactful, that really are elevated. I think that when we're not doing that, we tend to put out to the world things that are maybe smaller than what we can really truly impact. So that's the first piece. I think really doing the work around understanding what makes you unique, your story, all the pieces that come in together. And then the second piece of the puzzle is that to create the most powerful offer, you need to be solving a problem and always starting with the client. What problem are you solving? And I think what ends up happening is we start with what do we do instead of the problem that we solve. And
Mm.
when you're solving a problem, you're creating a transformation and really creating impact for that person. And if you're doing that, then you're less attached to creating offers that are time bound. Oh, well, I charge this for this and I charge that for that. And I've got these little offers that do this thing here. But actually, you're thinking about the end goal for the client. And when you're able to do that, that's when you create the best kind of offers the most impactful offers, and the most profitable offers.
Yeah, I love that. It's focusing on solving the problem, not just on, I think it's kind of like an inner, you're looking in. I mean, your first step, of course, is to think about you, like what you, um, the way that you like to work and what your preferences are and playing to your strengths and things like that. But ultimately, it needs to be in service of solving a problem for your clients or students or customers or whoever it is. Yeah, so those are really important things to key into.
Yeah, and I think the reason why you start with you is because then it gives you the confidence to know that you can solve the problem, right? So
Mm.
it's about untapping the things that make you, Kim, unique to be able to do the things that you do to create the impact that you want to create for the people that you work for. And that's why those two pieces in conjunction is so powerful.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also think that it's important to. I'm sure that when you work with people who are in this particular stage of business, um, they've maybe started producing offers or putting offers out there that really it's not quite the right combination of all those factors, right? And so how hard is that when you're working with people to like undo that or, take that down? Okay, well, I did have this program running, but it's just not working for, various reasons. But what I really want to put out there is this new thing. So talk to me about that transition because I think that that can be hard because people can get really attached to what they have already created. And it's hard to be like, nope, that is not, I'm going to let that go. That's not working. What I really need to do is this. But do you have some, wisdom around that?
Yeah, I think the thing is that as business owners, we need to remember that business is iterative. No
Mhm.
business in this world, the most successful brands that you can think of started with the same offers that they're offering now, products or whatnot. So this is the thing, is that honoring the journey and knowing that, okay, that offer, that thing that I put out to the world, that absolutely worked for this season of my business, but now it's time to go into this next space. And really doing the work around what you actually want your business to look like is so important, because if you're, you know, continuing just to offer the same things, you're just going to get the same results. So
Mm.
knowing, okay, what that, back to what we were talking about before, what's that big vision? If your big vision is to be a global, global in your space, offering programs around the world to support people to do X, Y, Z, and you're offering one-to-one services based on an hourly rate over here, and you're not prepared to budge, then you're not going to get to your vision. So
Mm.
knowing that there's going to be stepping stones, and what you do tomorrow isn't going to help you to achieve that big 10-year goal, but it's going to be that step. And then there's going to be that next step, and then that next step after that. But absolutely retiring offers that are redundant or not serving you is essential. But yeah, you need to obviously do it in a way that you're not chopping and changing, every 6 months to confuse your audience. The message has to always remain the same.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. So when it comes to like introducing more leverage and more scale and that kind of thing, because of course, if we're talking about, the example that you just gave of somebody who's just working just one-on-one, but really if their goal is to have a much bigger, more global impact, then the logical thing, of course, is to find ways of introducing more leverage, more scale so that it's not just one-to-one, but one-to-many. So can you talk me through like how do you help people to decide when they're ready for that, how to make the jump into that stage? Give me some ideas on how somebody who's thinking that maybe, am I ready for that, is that my next move, how do they figure that out?
Yeah, I think the thing, firstly, is that one to many, in my opinion, sort of comes after you've done the work of one to one for a bit.
Mhm.
Because the reason why one to one is so powerful, I still do one to one and I love one to one because it's where you can get deep work done. It's where you get, transformation. You're also going to really understand the person that you're solving, whether it's one to one or a group, when you're doing it in an intimate setting. So I think realistically, the very first time, or the time to start looking at a group program, is when you've reached largely capacity and you're one to one. So jumping the gun and trying to go too early might mean that you're not able to get a deep enough transformation. It ends up being a little
Mhm.
bit too topical. So I would suggest that anyone who's at the stage where they're approaching booked out, or are booked out, that's a very good sign that a one to many program is ready to go.
Nice. That's great. And it can certainly be a gradual thing too, right? It doesn't have to be like, I am no longer ever doing any more one-to-one, right?
Absolutely. And I love one to one. So I've got a group
Mhm.
program, but I've also got a one to one program as well. So yeah, definitely. And again, back to what we were talking about before, you're the expert of your business. Forget what the experts are telling you out there. You get to decide. If you love doing one to one, don't ever let it go. It's up to you.
Yeah, exactly. Just noticing all of those like shoulds, I shouldn't be doing one-to-one coaching at this stage of the game. But if you love it and your clients are getting amazing transformation, then keep it in there. Like that can be part of your suite of offerings. So I love that.
Yeah, and I think that the second part of it is that what do you do to prepare for it? I think this is the thing about the messy middle is that our business can get away from us. So making sure that you've got the systems, you've got the tools, you've got the capacity to work with those extra clients. So that's the other piece of the puzzle that I'd really encourage you to think about is not hitting go before you've got at least the support and the framework to help with the growth. And that's what can be really tricky when you are growing is that if you don't have that in place, mistakes start to happen, things slip through the cracks. You start to feel the additional pressure. But taking, and I always think about that the fable, the hare and the turtle or the tortoise,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
there's a lot of like hare mentality out there, right? It's like,
Yes.
can we get there fast? Like, but in that fable, obviously, it's the turtle that gets there in the end. So knowing that it's okay to take space to get a few things into place. You don't have to have all the ducks in a row, but to make sure you've got enough to serve and support the client load that's coming in.
That's such a good point because you're right. Like, I mean, one to many sounds great. And, maybe your coaching hours go down because you're, working with a group all at once rather than multiple different one to one appointments during the week. But with one to many comes a lot more admin, right? Like, you just have many more people who also you need to serve and troubleshoot and they have problems logging into their account, all of that stuff, right? And so, absolutely not jumping into that before you have at least some sense of how are you going to support and deal with all of the additional admin that comes when you're moving into more leverage, more scaled model.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about boundaries for a second. Because I really think we've been talking about, designing the business the way that you want it to be. We've been talking about not being a slave to your business, not doing things in the way that you think that you're supposed to or that the world out there tells you that you should. And I think that boundaries play a really key role there in, creating your business the way that you want so that you can have the freedom that you want. So tell me a little bit more, like what do you recommend for people about how they can build those boundaries and hold true to those boundaries.
I think the first and foremost thing is, Kim, is knowing what you're willing to accept and what you're not, or what you're prepared to accept and what you're not. So I mentioned before, for me, I work school hours. So
Mm.
if a client comes in for a discovery call or a clarity call and they're like, oh, I can only, do this time at 4 p.m. on a Friday, I'm like, that's not going to work. So knowing what I'm prepared to do in my business and what's important to me gives me the ability to say hard boundary. Absolutely not. These are the times that I do the coaching. If that works for you, great. And it's not about being so rigid that you're holding yourself up here and your clients down here. It's not about that. It's actually about honoring your strength, honoring your boundaries and what's important to you. So that's the first thing, is knowing the things that you're willing to accept and the things that you aren't. And then also knowing that it's okay. Again, women are conditioned and to
Yes.
please, to serve, to be available to everybody, and especially so mothers, because we're having to do that for our children. But the reality is that if you are not going to put the boundaries in place or put boundaries in place, then you will burn out. Okay. And I think
Mhm.
that sometimes, even in the wellness industry, is that you may know this intellectually, but what's that saying? I don't know if it's the same in the States, but a painter's house is never painted. And
Oh, no, I haven't heard
you
that.
haven't
That's
heard, it
great.
might be an Australian
Yep.
thing. But basically, it basically what that means is that we can be experts in something and sometimes we don't even do those things. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a call out here that if you are, out there sharing with your clients not to be doing those things, and then you're listening here today and thinking, oh, yep, I do that too.
Guilty.
Guilty as charged. So it's really just comes down to what's important to me, what are the things that I want to put in place, so that clarity of what the boundary is, and then simply getting some language around it. So how will you put that to your clients, so that if something was to presenting yourself some scenarios, so that if that comes up for a client, what will you say? Or if a client emails you, take a beat, think about it, and then respond rather than reacting, and not saying yes to everything, because the truth is that what you say yes to over here is you're saying no to that thing over there. So take the example of the 4 p.m. call, right? If I take that call, I'm going to be feeling stressed on a Friday afternoon. My kids are ready to down tools and flow
Yeah.
on into the weekend. I might have someone come, that wants to catch up for a Friday afternoon, play date or whatever. And then I can't do those things. So I'm saying no to that if I'm saying yes to that over here.
Yeah, exactly. That's so important. And I mean, I really think of it like exactly like you said, it's a sort of a 1-2 punch. You have to know what your boundaries are. You have to decide what you're going to tolerate and what you're not going to tolerate. But then the protecting of those, like you can, some people, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. But then when push comes to shove, when it's actually time for you to uphold the boundary that you've created, that's when I think it can get really tricky for people, especially like you said, for women, for mothers, and for people who are in the health and wellness industry. We are in the business of helping people. So we are really not feeling terribly inclined to say no, or to say, I can't do that, I can't help you with that, or whatever it is that you need to say to maintain that boundary. So I think, though, just even knowing that most of us are predisposed to having a challenge with maintaining our boundaries. So just knowing that, and then doing what you can it's going to be a constant work. For me, it's a constant work in progress to always be checking in with myself. Okay, on my boundaries, am I getting pushed too far, right? Like too flexibility is great. Absolutely. I'm into flexibility, but sometimes you can just start to lose sight of what your boundary is.
I agree. And I just want to touch on one more thing when it comes to boundaries, is that sometimes you need boundaries from yourself. And what I mean by that is that, as I said, business owners, we're pretty high achievers. And many of us are type A, myself included.
Yeah.
And I love to work. Like, I love to work. I love to get into my office. I love to work, work, work. And it's just like bunker down and da da da. And it's like that you need to create a boundary from yourself, because from speaking from someone who has burnt out twice, and knowing that I have to intentionally switch off, and that I have to say no and shut the doors to my office and walk out and know that it's okay not to go back in. So even if you love working, it doesn't mean it's the right thing for you to do. So creating boundaries between yourself and the business, if you want to be here 10, 15 years from now, that is essential.
You're so right. And I'm so glad that you said that, because yes, you're right. Like boundaries from yourself. I am totally guilty of that, because just like you, Kristy, I love to work. I love what I do. And I could probably just work all the hours of the day and just feel completely content and happy in my thing. But that's clearly not going to work, because everything else is going to start to crumble. My family, everything will, come apart at the seams. So yeah, absolutely. Maintaining boundaries. So how do you do that? Like at the end of the day, because honestly, I could just keep on working and, eat at my desk, like do the whole thing, right? I wouldn't need to. Eventually, of course, I would crash and burn. But so do you do something specific to give yourself a notification? Okay, end of day, now move on, and like step out of your office, close the door, whatever you have to do. How do you do it?
Well, I've done a lot of work on myself. And firstly, rather than a tool, it's self-awareness. So
Mm,
knowing when I'm overinvesting, now, to be clear, there's going to be seasons where you have to overinvest. But as long as there's coming out of it, you're going to stop. And for me, I just one thing that happened to me, it was in 2017, I was completely burnt out, and I read the book Thrive from Arianna Huffington, and there was a passage in
So
there.
good.
It's so good. And there's a passage in there, and it's really interesting. It was the one passage that I did not want to read or take in, and it was, what would be your legacy after you left this earth? And I was like, oh, that's silly. And then like all these signs happened in the days that followed around, pointing to that. And I was like, okay, this is it. I've got to take notice of this. And then what is my legacy? I was basically working. My relationships were strained. I was having a hard time with my children. I just was not the person that I wanted to be and on this earth. And that passage changed my life. And it was from that moment onwards that I started to become really intentional around what my boundaries are for others and for myself. And communicating those boundaries to others makes you accountable to those boundaries yourself. So I think that that's a big thing, is having that self-awareness it's not working, and then communicating your boundaries and being really intentional. And like you, Kim, even all these years on, what's it been, 5 years on, I still have to work at those boundaries, but knowing what's important, circling back to the beginning of the episode, what's my life goals? At the end of the day, what I create inside my business is one part of who I am. But who I am as a mother, a wife, a daughter, a friend, a person as myself, those things are also really important. So a lot of inner work had to happen for me to get to this point. But tools, I don't know, I don't really have as much. It's just the knowing, I think, is really what it's for me.
Yeah, I think that that's so true, and I'm gonna have to give that book a reread. Maybe I'll link that in the show notes too for people who are wanting to reconnect.
An oldie but a goodie.
It's so good though, because I mean, of course, that's her story. That's Arianna Huffington's story too, right? Is that she was just, it was out of passion. She loved what she was doing, but had a real wake up call when she realized that she just had no, balance. I don't know if that, but really, that's what it was, and had no boundaries. So I love it. That's so helpful. This has just been so great chatting with you, Kristy. You've shared so much wisdom and so many ideas to help people, especially in that messy middle stage, that stressful stage of trying to reach the next level, but just like barely keeping your head above water at this current level. So it's just been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've loved this conversation too, Kim.
Yeah. Now, before I let you go, though, I want you to tell us where people can go to learn more about you and get in touch with you and all of those good things.
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, on Instagram, my website, kristyrobinson.com.au, and I also have a podcast, Run Your Business Like a Boss.
Awesome. That's great. I will put all of those things in the show notes. I'll put all those links in so that people can easily find you. And have an amazing day. Thank you so much, Kristy.
Thanks, Kim.
Okay, well, I truly hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Kristy, and that if you identified with the stage that we were talking about, that you are, one, not feeling so alone in this anymore, but also two, I'm hoping that you've got some fresh ideas on how to regain your clarity and realign your business with your values and your goals and get yourself back on track and moving toward that next level with intention and ease. I would love to know your thoughts on this. Do you resonate with this particular stage, this messy middle? And are these things that you are struggling with? Do you struggle with maintaining your boundaries, for example? And also, I want you to tell me, what next steps do you plan to take to realign and get yourself out of that hustle and burnout path that you're on? So let me know in the comments below this video, or if you're listening to the audio of this episode, then find me on Instagram and let me know. I would love to continue the conversation about this. Okay, that's a wrap for today. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you again very soon.